Mr Chair, I call the Honourable Minister, Kate Wilkinson.
Thank you, Mr Chair, and I'll just take a few minutes to have a call on this. I think there is general agreement throughout the House that freedom camping in New Zealand is a valued tradition, and it is part of our way of life. And no wonder, actually, when we have so much beautiful scenery and we are the best country in the world. But having said that, Mr Chair, unfortunately there are some behaviours that do need to be discouraged. But I really want to take a call just to address a couple of the issues and questions that have been raised by the Labour opposition. And the first one is in relation to blanket bans. And you'll see there is absolutely no intention in this piece of legislation to allow local authorities to issue a blanket ban on freedom camping in their area. And in fact, one of the amendments themselves, as I think was pointed out, was in clause 3(2)(a), which specifically says that the powers of regulation under the Act do not allow for freedom camping to be prohibited on all land. So it's therefore addressing the blanket ban. In addition to this, it further actually provides later on in the Part 2 of the bill that the bylaw has to be appropriate and proportionate. So we think that we have put in sufficient safeguards to prevent a local authority thinking they've got carte blanche, that they can just issue a total blanket ban on freedom camping in New Zealand. The other misunderstanding that the opposition has is that this legislation, they seem to think this legislation bans freedom camping. In fact, it does the complete opposite. It is permissive. In fact, it permits it. It actually specifically provides for freedom camping, which until now hasn't been protected or enshrined in law. And so this actually is a good piece of legislation. And finally, the final issue I want to raise is from the Honourable Member Steve Chadwick, who I recognise as a former Minister of Conservation. And she made the interesting comment that they have a bylaw that provides for this in Rotorua, which is working well. Well, actually, all this legislation does is provide for other local authorities to actually have the same bylaw. But what actually happens under the bylaw in Rotorua is if you need to enforce it, you have to go through the courts, and that wastes court time, several thousands of dollars and legal fees, when actually an instant $200 fine should be all that's required. So it actually is pretty light-handed. But I do agree that we do need to do, this is only one of the tools in the toolbox, we do need to get across the culture that actually spoiling our pristine countryside is not acceptable. Freedom camping is irresponsible. Spoiling of our countryside is not. That will take more than just one piece of legislation to stop. That will take a change of attitude. That will take education. That will take working with the Department of Conservation, local authorities, working together with the various sector groups, having the appropriate signage and a whole lot of other tools. This is one small tool in the toolbox which we hope will discourage those people, irresponsible people, who want to spoil our countryside.
Mr Chair.